The story begins in a simple cabin where a red-haired little girl is with her grandmother until a beastly creature bursts through the door. The girl hides on top of the ceiling beams, watching the destruction of her home. In addition to breaking everything, the monster throws the elderly woman around and even pierces one of her eyes. Unable to contain her horror, the girl screams and tells the creature to leave her grandmother alone. The monster immediately looks up with a fearsome snarl, but before it can harm her, it simply bursts into flames. We then discover that this was all a nightmare of a woman named Virginia Sullivan. She was asleep in a car parked in the middle of a square in what appears to be a deserted village. Waking up startled, she takes out a revolver from her bag and starts walking around the square as if expecting an enemy attack at any moment. But who suddenly appears behind her is her fiancé, Nathan. As she quickly hides the gun, he explains that the GPS stopped working and fears they are somewhat lost. Virginia says it's not a problem because she knows the way from there. The two are going to spend the weekend with her family, who still haven't met Nathan. After taking a quick call, he promises not to think about work anymore. Since Nathan is a police officer, Virginia laughs and says he doesn't even need to bring the gun because her relatives won't intimidate him that much. A few kilometers later, he says the phone won't be a problem either, as it seems there is no signal around. And then they arrive at the country house, where Virginia is warmly welcomed by her grandmother, Rosemary. Her brother Jake also comes to hug her and helps unload the luggage. Nathan notices that he calls Virginia Red and asks if it's because of the color of her hair, but Jake says no. The nickname is a family tradition, always given to the eldest daughter of each generation. However, when Nathan asks more questions about the origin of the tradition, Jake changes the subject and tells him to ask Virginia about it directly. In the living room, Rosemary says that everything is peaceful there, as the truce has been respected. Barely paying attention, Virginia also talks about her current job and how she helps keep her skills sharp. Then she finally reveals the true reason for her visit and warns her grandmother that she intends to come clean with Nathan, telling him the whole truth about the Sullivans. Rosemary says that this needs to be a decision made by the entire family, reminding them that it's not easy to accept the situation for someone from the outside. Virginia agrees but assures that Nathan is the right man and says she doesn't want to spend her whole life lying to him. During the snack, we learn that Nathan and Virginia are FBI agents, which is where they met. Because of this, Jake makes some jokes about the secrets of the Sullivan family, and everyone laughs. But when the couple leaves the room, Rosemary frowns and tells her grandson to watch his tongue. Nathan has barely arrived and is already breaking the phone rule. He goes to the car to grab his cell phone and is trying to find a spot with signal when a man suddenly scares him. He is injured and in terrible condition, only able to say the name Gabriel before losing consciousness. Very worried, Nathan promises to get help and goes to the door, asking someone to call the police. But as soon as he returns, the man is no longer there. There is a pile of ashes in the same spot, and to Nathan's astonishment, it seems that the stranger was completely incinerated in seconds. Only a bracelet remains, and from it, Jake identifies the person as a man named Xavier. When Sheriff Marcus arrives, we learn that he is Jake and Virginia's older brother. Nathan is shocked to hear him ask for a shovel, seeing that the sheriff intends to cover up the evidence of the incident. Marcus tells his sister to handle the situation, unaware that this is precisely what she wanted. She takes Nathan to the family archives and reveals that the Sullivans are werewolf hunters. Nathan does not take this news very well and decides to call the FBI, entering the forest while trying to get some signal. Virginia fears that he will be attacked by the same thing that took Xavier down, but her brother won't let her follow him. It has already gotten dark when the storm begins, and Nathan is startled by the voice of a stranger. The man is partially covered by shadows and offers help if Nathan is lost. When he warns that there is a ferocious animal on the loose, the man laughs at him and starts to transform into a werewolf before his eyes. Nathan begins to run, but the creature quickly manages to knock him down and introduces itself as Gabriel before attacking him. Virginia becomes distressed upon hearing howls in the forest, and Marcus points to the crescent moon, repeating that what she fears is impossible. Still, she decides to look for her fiancé along with Jake, and they find him moments later when the bite on his neck disappears. Nathan wakes up dazed and recounts everything that happened, but he cannot say if he was bitten. Virginia explains that she would have to eliminate him if that were the case, but after a quick examination, she concludes that there is no danger. At home, she explains that Xavier was the leader of the last pack in the area, with whom the Sullivans had a long truce. No one knows who Gabriel is, and a werewolf that could transform outside of a full moon has never been seen. When Nathan goes up to the bedroom, Marcus and Rosemary comment on another strange detail in this story. Until today, no one from outside the family has survived an encounter like this. At the same time, Nathan begins to feel ill, and his mind is invaded by flashes of the recent attack. Jake spends the whole night following Gabriel's tracks, and the next day, he tells his siblings that he came from the other side of the river. Knowing that this represents an invasion of territory and the end of the truce, the three siblings prepare for war, taking the opportunity to teach Nathan everything. During this training, Jake explains that a werewolf bite is reversed by the death of the werewolf that bit the person, but only if this happens before the newly bitten one takes a life. The brothers confess that Rosemary is the only one who managed this feat when she reversed her husband, who was their grandfather. Seeing that the hunt will take place during the day, Nathan asks how to know if the suspect is human or not. Then Marcus demonstrates with his own brother. He shoots him with a projectile made from a chemical compound containing silver and explains that, if Jake were a werewolf, it would cause an instant partial mutation. Returning to that village, Virginia recounts that all the residents were transformed in a single and terrible attack many years ago. Nathan is somewhat shocked to understand that the Sullivans wiped out the entire town after that, but Marcus has no regrets. In his opinion, they shouldn't have respected the truce, as this was a chance to rid the world of this plague. The four run to hide when a car with two people arrives. Jake fires the identifying shot, confirming that they are indeed werewolves. Then Marcus moves on to the real bullets, and Virginia showcases her knife skills. Another enemy appears in a window, but is quickly taken down by the Sullivans. After the three turn to ash, someone starts banging on the trunk, and they find a crying hostage. The girl explains that she fell into a trap when she was driving on the road and was kidnapped by the wolves. She also mentions that they said something about a macabre game she would have to participate in soon. Marcus asks Nathan to take her to the hospital with Virginia, while he checks the rest of the village with Jake. Meanwhile, we see a series of other young people chained to the ceiling in an abandoned building. Their captors make way for Gabriel, who begins to make a speech about the glory of the wolves and claims they do not need to obey the phases of the moon. The rest of the pack admires him proving what he says even during the day, while the hostages become even more terrified. A few hours later, Virginia thanks Nathan for not telling the girl's parents in the hospital. He confesses that he enjoyed hunting werewolves and says he felt powerful. When it begins to get dark, Gabriel tells the humans that today, they will experience the joys of animal life. He orders them to be released so the game can begin. While the rest flee running, a young man asks Gabriel to bite him right there, saying he wants to be like him, and the werewolf gladly accepts the offer. Outside, the victims scatter, and a girl tries to hide from the werewolves that are hunting by car. She begins to scream when she looks up and sees Jennifer, an ally of Gabriel, who is already transforming to attack her. Nearby, another victim finds the Sullivans and tries to explain what is happening, not knowing that one of the wolves is hiding in a bush. However, Nathan suffers another flash and instinctively aims at the enemy. He hits the werewolf squarely, which leaves Marcus very suspicious. Returning home, the brothers tell their grandmother the terrible news. According to the survivors, Gabriel taught the rest of the pack to control their transformations, and moreover, he manages to communicate with them telepathically. As the next night is the full moon, the group organizes to patrol the area with extra caution. However, Nathan soon begins to feel the effects of the moon in his body and cannot contain the transformation. Virginia panics when she sees him in his wolf form, but does not let them kill him. She neutralizes her fiancé herself, and he spends the rest of the night locked in a cage. Nathan wakes up devastated and, not knowing if he hurt anyone, questions Virginia, but she assures him that he did not. Marcus becomes furious with his sister and accuses her of risking the safety of the family, but she retorts that Nathan is part of it. Rosemary defends her and asks her grandson if he would have hunted his own brothers in the same way if this had happened to one of them. Jake also says that Nathan can still be saved if they manage to take care of Gabriel in time, but Marcus says that even then, he will never be the same. Virginia says that this will be her problem in the future and convinces her brother to help her, even against his will. Meanwhile, Gabriel expands his teachings to the newly bitten. training the new members of the pack to control their transformations. Each time one of them fails or gives up, Gabriel eliminates the pupil mercilessly, keeping his pack strong at all costs. Jake is still trying to locate the werewolves' hideout with the information the survivor passed on, but the man was so hysterical that he might have gotten something wrong. All that is known is that it must be somewhere near the Tanner River, the old border of the territory. Marcus still does not accept Nathan's presence normally and prevents him from joining the hunt this time. Another car is abandoned in the middle of the village when the brothers arrive there. Marcus notices that the plates are always from other states, indicating a pattern in the pack's behavior. Just like that first girl, the other victims must have also been kidnapped after being ambushed on the road. Then a suspicious noise catches their attention and leads them to an abandoned factory on the back street. The place is empty, but Virginia finds blood marks on a trap door and asks Marcus to open it. Meanwhile, Rosemary prepares to watch over Nathan during the night. He is already ready to be locked in the cage once again, and she gives him some pills, hoping that he won't wake up with the power of the moon. Worried about the future of their engagement, he asks her what happened to her husband. She reveals that the story didn't have a happy ending as Virginia made it seem. Her husband ended up liking being a werewolf and never forgave her for taking that away from him. Under the effect of the pills, Nathan collapses on the pillow before hearing the end of the story. Rosemary reveals that she ended up sacrificing her husband when he finally managed to become a werewolf again. Now she is determined to spare her granddaughter from a tumultuous marriage like hers. And that is why she has tranquilizer injections ready to take down Nathan if he dares to move. Now the three brothers have gone down to the basement of the factory, but they still haven't found anyone. They take too long to realize that it's a trap, and soon they faint from the effects of the gas. This was all part of Gabriel's plan to wipe out the lineage of the hunters. Virginia wakes up chained and asking for her brothers, but Gabriel only responds with more taunts, unbothered when she swears she will take revenge for this. We see that the other two are locked in another part of the building, and Jake is still unconscious. Marcus tries to wake him up with shouts, and then Gabriel arrives, punching the boy until he wakes up. In a very classy manner, he tells them that this is a tribute to their heroism, recognizing the family's bravery. He is going to give them the honor of being the first meal for the new members, as this generation still needs to prove its worth to earn a permanent place in the clan. Just like the first time, he asks the minions to release the Sullivans, giving them a small advantage before the game starts. The two take off running as soon as they see themselves free from the chains, and Jake pulls out a knife he keeps hidden in one of his boots, happy to see that they didn't check his shoes. It doesn't take long for the duo to find themselves face to face with a group of hungry werewolves. The fight begins, and Jake manages to get rid of the first one very quickly. Then he sees that everyone seems to have vanished into thin air without explanation. Marcus is breathless, but assures that he's fine and asks Jake to go look for Virginia. As he moves away, we see that Marcus is trying to hide an injury from his brother, as the situation is quite serious. Then he is suddenly grabbed by the werewolf that had been hiding at the top of the tree all this time, and we see his body being lifted rapidly. In the village, Gabriel and Jennifer watch the flames spreading in spots across the square, knowing that each one of them represents one less wolf. Gabriel softens the defeat, saying that this way they get rid of the weakest ones, but admits that he did not expect so many losses. The one responsible for all this is Jake, who leaps from the rubble to grab Jennifer at that moment. Seeing his favorite in danger, Gabriel rushes to intervene, but cannot reach her in time and is devastated to see her turn into another bonfire. Jake is also furious and demands to know where Virginia is. Gabriel lies and says that she is already gone and begins to transform into a werewolf as Jake bravely advances toward him. The next morning, Rosemary waits for her grandchildren at the door of the house, very worried. When Nathan wakes up, he decides to go look for them and does not let her accompany him, saying that it will only delay him. Arriving in the forest, he finds what remains of Marcus and is outraged, promising his brother-in-law that he will avenge him. It is then that Gabriel's voice invades his mind, telling him to stop deceiving himself and urging him to embrace his desire to be a wolf. Struggling to ignore the voice, Nathan continues the search and reaches the square, where he finds Jake lifeless as well. Gabriel's words continue to try to confuse him, and the flashes of that first night disturb him more than ever. Still, he proceeds and enters the abandoned factory, following his instincts. His hallucinations intensify, and he fires at nothing whenever he sees Gabriel's image before his eyes. The sound of the gunshots alerts Virginia, and she begins to scream, leading Nathan to the basement. As soon as he arrives, She asks where her brothers are and begins to cry when she sees that he lacks the courage to answer. Nathan manages to free himself from the chains, and the two escape the factory, but Gabriel's voice continues its telepathic threats. Predicting that the couple will never be happy when one's nature is to kill the other, he once again encourages Nathan to switch sides and announces that he will go after Virginia as soon as night falls. Rosemary is devastated to see what they have done to her two grandchildren. Filled with hatred, she tells Virginia that she must exterminate each of those monsters before they spread terror even more. Knowing that Gabriel intends to attack them today, the couple prepares to defend the house with all the available weaponry. Nathan contributes until the last minute and warns when he starts to feel the first effects of the full moon. Then he goes down to his cage and, without the two noticing, Rosemary replaces the ammunition in his weapon, swapping the tranquilizers for bullets. The invasion begins shortly afterward, with dozens of werewolves crossing the forest toward the Sullivans' house. Virginia stands on the porch firing at them and manages to take several down. However, it does not take long before one of them manages to circle around the house and burst through a window. When Virginia enters to pursue him, another one invades from upstairs and lunges at her. She fights alone against the two until she manages to vaporize the first one, and soon also hits the other from behind. The next visitor is Gabriel, and Virginia hits him in the shoulder right off the bat, but that does not seem to have any effect on the villain. Despite this, he is surprised by the agility of his opponent when he turns to attack her and sees that she has already disappeared. Virginia is hidden at the top of the stairs, listening to Gabriel call her brothers cowards and waiting for the right moment. Then she leaps onto the enemy by surprise, but misses his heart once again. Another werewolf enters through the porch and begins to chase her through the house, but also does not last long. Virginia goes up to the attic to regroup, not seeing Gabriel sneaking in through the window. At the same time, Rosemary apologizes to Nathan, thinking he is sleeping, and pulls the trigger. He escapes the shot and begins to transform immediately, much to Rosemary's dismay, who fumbles with the ammunition. He is already fully transformed when she manages to load the weapon, and now her shots can no longer stop him. While Gabriel and Virginia fight upstairs, Nathan escapes from the cage and attacks Rosemary. Finally, Virginia manages to throw her enemy over the railing. He falls down below and she jumps after him, plunging a silver-tipped spear into his heart. However, he has not finished burning yet when Virginia hears a terrible howl and suspects the worst may have occurred. She runs to the cage and sees her grandmother fallen on the ground, lifeless and missing one of her eyes. Wearing a red cloak, she goes out into the forest calling for her fiancé until he suddenly knocks her down. The next day, Virginia wakes up and discovers that she has been bitten on the neck. Nathan is curled up behind a wall, still very confused. She tells him about the victory and says she defeated all the wolves in the pack. Upon seeing her neck, he says that they can stay locked up during the full moon and swears that everything will be fine. Then they embrace, and Virginia plunges the silver blade from her knife into her beloved's heart, thus breaking her own curse and returning to being human. Years later, she is telling the story of Little Red Riding Hood to a little girl who appears to be her daughter when the two hear a chilling howl, and this shows Virginia that such a curse still continues in the world.